Welcome back to the channel, folks, for another episode in the British Wildflower series, where today, the 5th of May 2026, we take a look at a mysterious plant known as Lords and Ladies or Cuckoo Pint, otherwise known as Arum maculatum. At first glance, you might be forgiven to think that this ancient plant had arrived from a Martian colony, it lacking showy petals and sepals. The plant's simple structure belies the complex processes going on behind the scenes. Those processes are magically contained by a cow-like structure around the reproductive parts. That simple structure contains 1. A bract-like leaf structure wrapped tightly at the base to form a chamber, known as the spathe. 2. An upright column arising off the receptacle containing the reproductive structures, known as a spadix. And 3. The vegetative characteristics, the arrow-like leaves, some of which have black spots. In today's episode, we'll be looking at the plant identification, its structure and function, and relating that to the plant's mysterious pollination method, taking a deep dive and unravelling the mystery. I hope also you can join me in part 2 of the episode, where we look at the fascinating strategy which the Arums employ in their pollination. So, in part 2, we shall look at the bizarre tale of how the plant turns its central heating up to be higher than human body temperature, how it volatilizes chemical analogues to attract female midges, and how it fools those midges and traps them into thinking it's had a nesting site in Cow Dung. Phew! All heralded by the cuckoo on the 1st of May, where at 12 noon the flower will open its spathe, hence the name Cuckoo Pint. The plant flowers in inverted commas between April and May, in other words exposes the spadix, usually around midday, when it is receptive for optimal insect pollination. The plant is known by a number of common vernacular names, such as Lords and Ladies, Arum Lily, Cuckoo Pint, Jack-In-The-Pulpit, Adder's Root and Bobbins, and as stated, the plant is a member of the Family Araceae or the Arum Family. The derivation of the Latin binomial is straightforward. Arum comes from the Greek name of plants of this type, and the suffix maculatum comes from the Latin meaning spotted, and is a reference to the spotted or stained leaves of this plant. Just a quick recap on the habitat. The plant is a perennial woodland plant which can be an indicator of ancient woods. It is commonly found in woodlands, hedgerows, riversides and uncultivated areas where it can grow as a weed in partly shaded spots. Arum maculatum prefers well-drained, loamy soil that retains moisture but does not become waterlogged. Okay folks, we're in quite a tight spot and quite at a steep embankment, which is why I approached the plant gingerly. And we're close to a little river which flows in the beck down in the bottom there. And the plant that we have found today is known as Lords and Ladies, or Arum maculatum, today being the 24th of April. Interestingly, there is one other confusion species with variegated leaves known as Italian Lords and Ladies, but this is our native Lords and Lady plants, Arum maculatum, and it is a little bit ironic because where we're filming today in Shelf Park just behind me, it was during the war an Italian prison of war camp. However, I can assure you this is the native lords and ladies. What can we say about the plant? Well, it's a woodland plant, technically an ancient woodland indicator. This large structure here is known as a spathe, and I'm not going to dissect it. I will use a static slide of a previous plant. So this is the spathe. Inside it has the various reproductive parts. I'll try to just gently unfurl it. In fact, I won't, because it will damage the plant. But you can see here the swollen base is where some of the reproductive parts are. And this will open up something like that when it is a little bit older or more mature. Later in the season, when it sets seed and ripens into fruit, we will have a large column of bright red aggregated berries, which are the fruit of lords and ladies. The leaf, or the vegetative characteristic, is very straightforward. As you can see here, it's a long, pointed, broad leaf with two pointed corners. And unlike the Italian lords and ladies, the confusion species, this is not a variegated leaf. It's a bright green, glossy leaf. So this is the plant. We are seeing it in shaded woodland, right close to a little beck or stream further down in this little clough. And the plant itself on a steep embankment where there is runoff. So it's quite an evergreen looking plant, almost succulent to feel. And the venation of the leaf is very characteristic. We'll look at that in a moment. Distinctive spathe, and it's very much a non-hairy plant, very much a succulent plant. So there we have it, Arum maculatum, native lords and ladies. We found it today on this embankment, quite close to a plant known as yellow archangel that we have covered in previous videos. And I don't know if you can see, but the leaf of this archangel is variegated, so it's the subspecies argentatum, and you can see the yellow flowers, and that is in the family Araceae. But our focus today is on the lords and ladies. In this episode, we are not going to cover the confusion species in detail, other than to outline those that you're most likely to commonly encounter, notably Italian lords and ladies, Arum italicum, and the American skunk cabbage, Psyhoda americanus. Whilst both these species have a spathe and a spadix, it is these features which help differentiate. Italian lords and ladies is a garden escapee, and it is relatively easy to distinguish from Wild Arum with its yellow clava, part of the spadix, as compared to the purple clava of the Wild Arum. In this image we see the distinctive yellow spike or clava of Arum italicum. Of course, the clinching feature is the variegated ornamental leaves. We will be covering both these species in future episodes on our Wildflower channel, so please subscribe to keep updated on the species as we add it to our British Flower playlist. You can also join me in part 2 of the episode, where we turning to our unfortunate friend, the American skunk cabbage, Psyhoda americanus, it being an ornamental bog plant which has become a prolific invasive. The plant with its bright yellow spathe is unfortunate in two contexts. Number one, it has a pungent aroma of rotting flesh, And number 2, it is designated an alien species under the Wildlife and Countryside Act of 1981 as amended 2016 and is therefore an alien invasive plant. This law places an obligation on landowners to deter its spread and impact on native biodiversity. So, before we view more footage, let us just recap on the features and characteristics which will enable us to identify it and find it in the field. As always, we include a detailed botanical slide for those of you who may wish to study this interesting plant further, and it may be stopped at any point to access the botanical details. The floral parts are located in the base of the spathe, surrounded by a cowl which helps raise the internal temperature. It is a perennial woodland plant which can be an indicator of ancient woods, and members of the Arum family are colloquially known as aroids. As per unique evolutionary strategy, the petals and sepals are absent. The stamens are numerous, with the purple anthers in the central ring of the spadix. There is one stigma with the style absent, and there is one ovary which is one-celled, giving rise to red fruit in autumn. The fruit is formed as a cluster of berries at the stem tip, approximately 3 to 5 centimetres long, and are scarlet, red or orange in colour. The berries are approximately 4 to 6 millimetres, and they have seeds of 1 to 3, which are 3 to 7 millimetres, globular and pitted. Finally, turning to the leaves, which appear in spring, they are 7 to 20 centimetres, blunt and arrow-shaped. They are shiny, bright, glossy green, often with small black, purple blotches. They have a network of veins, and they have 2 distinctive points on the base, giving an arrow-like appearance. The margins are entire and non-hairy, and the botanical name for the shape of the leaf is sagittate. So let's take a look at the spadix and reproductive parts in the field and under the lens. Okay folks, so we have returned today to look at this plant known as Arum maculatum, or lords and ladies, and specifically to look at and discuss the symbiotic pollination between the midge Psyhoda phallinoides, which is a specific kind of midge which is very much dependent on this plant to pollinate it. So what we have before us, if you recall, this structure was previously closed and today it is open and it is flowering, and this leafy like blade, which looks unusual in itself, is called the spathe. And what we will expose is a long structure within this bulbous projection at its base, and that long structure is called the spadix. And we'll be discussing how this cowl creates a temperature humid environment and how the smell is released from the components on the spadix to attract the midge, which is simulating the ideal egg laying conditions for the midge. And in attracting those small flies, which are often called sink flies, to the plant, it ends up pollinating it. So let's take a deep dive down in here and we look at the structure known as the spadix. In the macro session following this clip, we'll be doing a detailed breakdown naming the parts on this spadix. So let's start off by peeling back the spathe, opening it out and seeing what is revealed, which is the spadix. So down we go, and we'll include a diagram on the slides of the various layers and explain what is going on. So we're stripping this right the way back getting rid of the spathe, right down to the reproductive structures inside it. Now, this plant is unusual because it deviated in evolutionary terms from plants over 100 million years ago, but what we've now revealed is the spadix is about 4 inches in length, and we can see here we've got the upper area here, which is rather like the bulrush, and then we've got a layer of hairs. I don't know if you can see that, a layer of hairs just here. Then we have another section here which contains various bits, and then we have a layer of carpels. Now ideally, and the weather conditions are not lending to it, what would normally happen is the midge, which is Psyhoda phallinoides, the little sink midge or the midge, would be attracted down into the spathe and would move past these hair-like structures and then accumulate in the bottom of the spadix. And there can be many hundreds of these small midges, Psyhoda phallinoides, in the one reproductive cup. So we're unlucky today not to see an aggregation of these midges in the plant. But just to break that down again, we have this structure, a ring of hair-like structures, a gap, and then numerous carpels which are further down the spadix. So this is what is actually inside the spathe, and it's called the spadix. In this slide we show an aggregation of the midge Psyhoda phallinoides in better weather, all of which are female and aggregated at the base of the spadix. So let's take a look at the spadix and reproductive parts in the field and under the lens. Here in this footage we have the purple clava of the wild arum and the reproductive structures as we move down the spadix. First visible purple ring dusted by yellow pollen is the male parts or anthers, and as we move towards the receptacle, the green globular structures are the female carpels. In this section of the episode we do a brief macro fly-through showing the structures, beginning with the purple clava of wild arum in contrast to the yellow clava of the Italian species. In this shot we see 2 rings of hairs, the upper ring of hair being used to contain the midges and then withering in order to release them. These are not technically hairs at all, but in fact the sterile male flowers. In the next sequence we see the male structures set between the 2 gaps either side of the so-called hairs. The right hand slide depicts the ring of purple anthers, and on the left we see the same structure, yellow with the liberated pollen. Join me in part 2 of this episode where we explain the unique staging and sequence of the floral dance which contributes to the plant's pollination success. The next image, below the bottom ring of hairs on the spadix, depicts the female parts of the plant known as the carpels. It is these stigmas, which are without styles, which will eventually become pollinated by the midge Psyhoda phallinoides. In the next episode we'll be looking at the fascinating events whereby the plant synchronises and stages internal pollination events. We'll be looking at thermogenesis and how the plant raises its temperature to volatilize the chemical analogues which attract the midges. We will also look at the variety of smells or evolutionary syndromes which the arums have evolved in order to attract insects. So join me in part 2 where things heat up. In the meantime, we leave you with some tranquil shots of wild arum in a quiet woodland. Well folks, that's it from me on Wild Arum. Once again, thank you very much indeed for watching. If you have liked or enjoyed this video or found it interesting or educational, please like, share and subscribe to help this channel become a... In the meantime, join myself and Maggie in part 2. And whatever the weather may be, go outdoors and enjoy it.